Ladies and gentlemen, today I invite you to join me on a journey where we step away from fear, desperation, and external validation, and instead walk boldly into a space of courage, authenticity, and self-respect. How often do we pause to reflect on what it means to truly know our worth? In a world that bombards us with messages about who we should be, what we should have, and how we should look, it becomes all too easy to forget that our value is not dependent on these external factors. We find ourselves scrolling through curated lives on social media, comparing our behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. We measure our success, beauty, and happiness against a yardstick that was never meant to measure our unique existence. But here is a truth that cannot be overstated. Your worth is not conditional. It doesn't rise and fall with the opinions of others, the number of likes you receive, or the milestones you achieve. It is not contingent on being loved, accepted, or validated by someone else. Your worth is inherent, unchanging, and non-negotiable. When we fail to recognize this, we begin to act from a place of scarcity. We chase after people who do not value us, jobs that drain us, and lifestyles that don't align with who we are. We grasp for validation in relationships, careers, and achievements, hoping they will fill a void that only self-acceptance can truly satisfy. But the more we seek worth outside of ourselves, the more disconnected we become from the truth that we are already whole, already complete, already enough. Recognizing your worth means stepping away from the need to prove yourself. It means no longer tying your identity to someone else's perception of you. Imagine what your life would look like if you stopped basing your choices on whether they would make others approve of you. What if you chose to honor your own needs, desires, and values, regardless of whether they made sense to anyone else? When you embrace your worth, you stop begging for scraps of attention and start demanding the feast you deserve. You no longer settle for relationships that diminish you or situations that compromise your values. You no longer try to contort yourself into shapes that please others at the expense of your own authenticity. To embrace your worth is to understand that it does not require justification. You don't need to accomplish more, look a certain way, or gain someone's approval to be valuable. Your worth existed the moment you took your first breath, and it will exist long after others' opinions have faded. Knowing your worth also requires cultivating a sense of self-compassion. It means forgiving yourself for past mistakes and allowing yourself the grace to grow. It's about acknowledging your imperfections without letting them define you. Embracing your worth doesn't mean believing you are perfect. It means recognizing that your imperfections are part of what makes you human and therefore worthy of love and respect. And let's not confuse self-worth with arrogance. To embrace your worth is not to place yourself above others, but to stand confidently beside them, knowing you belong. It's about recognizing the intrinsic value that every human being, including you, carries. This acknowledgement doesn't diminish anyone else's worth. It simply affirms your own. Think of the energy you waste doubting yourself, seeking approval, and trying to fit into molds that were never meant for you. Now imagine channeling that energy into becoming the person you are meant to be, not the person others expect you to be, but the one who aligns with your own dreams, values, and potential. Embracing your worth isn't just an act of self-love, it's an act of liberation. When you truly embrace your worth, you begin to show up differently in the world. You speak with confidence, set boundaries with conviction, and make decisions that honor your values. You stop asking for permission to take up space and start living in a way that reflects the truth of who you are. This shift doesn't just change how you see yourself, it changes how others see you too. Respect begins with self-respect. The more you honor your worth, the more others will learn to honor it as well. Let me know if you'd like me to expand further or add additional perspectives. Setting boundaries is often one of the most misunderstood and underappreciated acts of self-care. Many of us have been conditioned to believe that boundaries are selfish or that they create distance in relationships. But the truth is quite the opposite. Boundaries are an act of love, not just for yourself, but for others too. They define the space where mutual respect can grow, where trust can thrive, and where healthy relationships can flourish. The courage to set boundaries begins with recognizing your worth. When you know what you deserve, peace, respect, honesty, you become less willing to tolerate anything that threatens these things. Boundaries are not about building walls to keep people out. They are about creating guidelines for how others can come closer to you without stepping on the sacred ground of your well-being. Yet setting boundaries isn't always easy. For many, it's fraught with guilt, fear, or the worry of upsetting others. We fear being labeled as difficult or unkind. We fear rejection or abandonment. But ask yourself, what is the cost of not setting boundaries? How often have you said yes when you wanted to say no only to feel resentful later? How often have you allowed someone to overstep, disrespect, or drain you simply because you didn't want to make waves? Boundaries are about reclaiming your power. They allow you to communicate your needs clearly and confidently. When you set a boundary, you are saying, this is where I end and you begin. This is what I need to feel safe, respected, and valued in this relationship. Boundaries are not ultimatums or threats, they are tools of clarity. They let people know how to engage with you in a way that preserves your dignity and theirs. Courage is the key. It takes immense bravery to say, this is what I need, and I am willing to risk your disapproval to honor myself, but this courage is also liberating. When you start setting boundaries, you discover an incredible truth: the people who truly care about you will respect your boundaries. And those who resist or violate them, they reveal themselves as people who perhaps were not meant to occupy such a central role in your life. Think about the boundaries you may need to set in your life right now. Maybe it's with a colleague who constantly takes advantage of your generosity. Perhaps it's with a family member whose criticism chips away at your confidence. Or maybe it's with a partner or friend who demands more from you than you are able or willing to give. Whatever the situation, setting a boundary requires you to confront the discomfort of the moment to protect your long-term peace. Boundaries are also an essential act of self-respect. When you consistently allow others to cross your boundaries, you send a message to yourself and to them that your needs and feelings are secondary. But when you set and enforce boundaries, you affirm your value. You remind yourself that your time, energy, and emotions are precious and worthy of protection. It's important to remember that boundaries are not static, they can evolve over time. What feels acceptable in one phase of your life may no longer serve you in another. For example, in a demanding season of work or caregiving, your boundaries around rest and personal space may need to become firmer. And that's okay. Boundaries are a dynamic reflection of your changing needs and priorities. Enforcing boundaries also requires consistency. It's not enough to articulate your needs, you must also uphold them. This is where courage is truly tested. Saying no or walking away when someone repeatedly disregards your boundaries can be one of the hardest things you'll ever do. But it's also one of the most empowering. Let's not overlook the fact that boundaries are not just about saying no to others, they are also about saying yes to yourself. They create space for the things that matter most: your passions, your relationships, your well-being. When you free yourself from the obligations and expectations that don't align with your values, you create room for joy, growth, and authenticity. Boundaries are not a sign of selfishness, they are a sign of self-awareness. They say, I care enough about myself to protect my peace, and I care enough about you to be honest about what I can and cannot give. True courage lies in setting boundaries without apology, knowing that doing so is an act of integrity and self-love. Let me know if you'd like additional elaboration or adjustments. Vulnerability is a word that often makes people uncomfortable. It conjures images of weakness, exposure, or a loss of control. Many of us were taught to avoid vulnerability at all costs. We build walls, wear masks, and adopt personas designed to protect us from rejection, judgment, or pain. But in truth, vulnerability is not a weakness. It is one of the most profound sources of strength we possess. To be vulnerable is to be authentic, and authenticity requires courage. It means showing up as you truly are without pretense or disguise. It means being honest about your fears, your dreams, your struggles, and your joys. Vulnerability invites connection because it is the language of humanity. It strips away the superficial and allows us to relate to each other on a deeper, more meaningful level. Why then do we resist vulnerability? Because it feels risky. To open ourselves to others is to expose our innermost selves, and with that comes the possibility of being misunderstood, dismissed, or hurt. It's no wonder we shy away from it. But here's the paradox: the very act of shielding ourselves from vulnerability also shields us from the love, belonging, and connection we crave most. Think about the relationships in your life that matter most. Are they built on perfection, or are they built on shared moments of imperfection? True intimacy, whether in friendships, family, or romantic relationships, doesn't come from presenting an image of flawlessness. It comes from saying, here I am as I am, and having that honesty met with acceptance. Vulnerability also plays a critical role in personal growth. To take a risk, to pursue a dream, to step outside your comfort zone, all of these require you to embrace uncertainty and the possibility of failure. Vulnerability isn't just about emotional openness, it's about daring to show up fully, even when the outcome is uncertain. It's about saying, I might fail, but I'm willing to try anyway. And yet many of us live in a world that views vulnerability as a liability. We are taught to armor up, to never let them see us sweat, to project confidence even when we feel unsure, and to hide our struggles as though they are shameful. But this armor comes at a cost. It isolates us, drains us, and keeps us from experiencing the full range of human connection and emotion. Let's talk about vulnerability in the workplace. How often do we hesitate to admit we don't have all the answers, or to acknowledge when we've made a mistake? Yet some of the most effective leaders are those who lead with vulnerability. They build trust by being transparent, foster innovation by encouraging risk-taking, and inspire loyalty by showing that they too are human. When leaders model vulnerability, they create a culture where people feel safe to take risks, ask for help, and collaborate authentically. Vulnerability is also essential in healing. When we go through pain, whether it's grief, heartbreak, or trauma, the instinct is often to suppress it, to push it down and carry on as though nothing has happened. But unprocessed pain doesn't disappear, it festers. Healing begins when we allow ourselves to feel, to name our emotions, and to seek support. It's in those moments of vulnerability when we say, I'm struggling and I need help, that we find resilience. And let's not forget the incredible strength it takes to be vulnerable in the face of judgment or criticism, to share your story, to speak your truth, or to pursue a dream when others might not understand or approve. That requires immense bravery. Vulnerability doesn't guarantee that others will respond with kindness or understanding, but it does guarantee that you are living in alignment with your truth. Vulnerability also invites creativity and innovation. To create anything new, a piece of art, a business idea, or a solution to a problem, you must be willing to risk failure, rejection, or ridicule. Every great work of art, every groundbreaking invention, every transformative movement began with someone willing to be vulnerable enough to take a chance. It's important to recognize that vulnerability doesn't mean oversharing or disregarding boundaries. Being vulnerable doesn't mean you have to expose every detail of your life to everyone you meet. Vulnerability requires discernment. It's about knowing when and with whom to share your truth. It's about choosing courage over comfort and authenticity over approval. Some might ask, why should I take the risk of being vulnerable when it's so much safer to stay guarded? The answer lies in the richness of life that vulnerability brings. Without vulnerability, there is no true connection, no growth, no courage. Life lived without vulnerability is life lived in a bubble safe, perhaps, but ultimately unfulfilling. Let me know if you'd like me to expand further or provide additional examples. Non-attachment is a concept that often gets misunderstood. People sometimes equate it with detachment, apathy, or indifference, as though it means cutting yourself off from the world or ceasing to care about people, dreams, or outcomes. But non-attachment is not about withdrawing, it's about engaging with life in a way that is free from the chains of control, fear, and clinging. It is about living fully, but without the desperation to hold onto what is fleeting or force outcomes that are beyond your control. At its core, non-attachment is rooted in the understanding that nothing in life is permanent. Relationships change, circumstances shift, opportunities come and go. When we attach our sense of happiness, security, or identity to things that are inherently impermanent, we set ourselves up for suffering. Non-attachment doesn't mean you stop caring, it means you learn to care without trying to possess. It's about appreciating the beauty of a moment, a relationship, or an experience without grasping at it, trying to freeze it in time, or making it the foundation of your self-worth. The power of non-attachment lies in the freedom it offers. Imagine the mental and emotional energy you spend worrying about whether things will turn out the way you want. How often do you find yourself replaying past events, wishing they had gone differently, or projecting into the future, fearing what might happen if things don't go as planned? Non-attachment allows you to let go of this endless cycle of rumination and focus on what truly matters, the present moment. When you practice non-attachment, you release the need to control others. You stop trying to make people behave a certain way to meet your expectations or validate your feelings. Instead, you give them the freedom to be who they are, and you give yourself the freedom to accept or walk away if who they are doesn't align with your values. This shift can transform relationships. It removes the tension created by unrealistic expectations and creates space for genuine connection based on mutual respect and authenticity. Non-attachment also transforms the way we approach our goals and ambitions. It's natural to want to achieve, to create, and to strive for success. But attachment to specific outcomes can make us rigid and anxious, turning our dreams into burdens. When we tie our happiness to a single outcome, be it a job, a relationship, or a milestone, we limit our ability to see the broader possibilities life has to offer. Practicing non-attachment doesn't mean giving up on your dreams. It means pursuing them with an open heart and an open mind. It's about putting in the effort, doing your best, and then letting go of the need to control how things unfold. When you approach life this way, you become more resilient. Setbacks no longer feel like failures, but opportunities to learn and grow. Rejection doesn't shatter your sense of self-worth, because you've already detached your value from external validation. Consider how non-attachment applies to relationships. So often, we cling to relationships out of fear of being alone, fear of losing someone, fear of change. This clinging can lead to unhealthy dynamics where we compromise our boundaries, overlook red flags, or stay in situations that no longer serve us. Non-attachment allows us to love freely and deeply without trying to control or possess the other person. It gives us the strength to let go when a relationship has run its course, trusting that our worth is not tied to someone else's presence in our lives. The practice of non-attachment is not easy. It requires a fundamental shift in mindset, a willingness to confront the fears and insecurities that drive our attachment. It requires us to question the narratives we've been taught that success looks a certain way, that happiness depends on achieving specific milestones, that love is about holding on rather than letting be. Non-attachment invites us to rewrite these narratives and create a new way of living that is rooted in trust, openness, and acceptance. In moments of loss or disappointment, non-attachment offers solace. It reminds us that pain is a natural part of life, but suffering is optional. Suffering arises when we resist what is, when we cling to what was, or when we demand that life conform to our expectations. Non-attachment helps us to embrace the impermanence of life with grace. It doesn't erase pain, but it softens it, allowing us to move through it without getting stuck. Non-attachment is not a rejection of connection or commitment. In fact, it deepens them. When you release the need to control or cling, you can fully experience the joy of being present. You can appreciate a beautiful sunset without lamenting that it will end. You can cherish the time spent with a loved one without worrying about how long it will last. Non-attachment allows you to be fully here now without the distractions of past regrets or future anxieties. It's also important to note that non-attachment is not about suppressing emotions. It doesn't mean you shouldn't feel joy, sadness, or anger. On the contrary, non-attachment allows you to feel these emotions fully without letting them define you. It's about experiencing the highs and lows of life without becoming overly entangled in them. It's about learning to flow with life rather than resist it. Practicing non-attachment takes time and effort. It's a daily commitment to mindfulness, self-awareness, and intentional living. It requires us to sit with discomfort, to observe our attachments, and to question their hold on us. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. Let me know if you'd like me to expand further or address additional aspects. The tension between self-focus and people-pleasing is one of the most common struggles in human relationships. On the surface, being a people-pleaser might seem admirable. After all, what's wrong with wanting to make others happy, to be helpful, or to avoid conflict? But beneath the surface lies a deeper question: at what cost? When the desire to please others comes at the expense of your own needs, boundaries, or identity, it ceases to be an act of kindness and becomes an act of self-abandonment. People-pleasing is often rooted in fear of rejection, fear of disappointing others, or fear of being perceived as selfish. It's a survival mechanism born out of the belief that your worth is tied to how well you can meet the expectations of those around you. Somewhere along the way, many of us internalize the idea that it's better to be agreeable than authentic, better to say yes than risk conflict, better to put others first, even when it leaves us depleted. But what happens when you live this way? Over time, people-pleasing erodes your sense of self. You become so focused on what others want or need that you lose touch with your own desires, values, and priorities. You might say yes to invitations, commitments, or favors you don't want to accept simply to avoid the discomfort of saying no. You might find yourself suppressing your opinions or pretending to agree with others to maintain harmony. You might even find yourself bending over backward to earn approval, only to feel unappreciated or resentful when your efforts go unnoticed. Self-focus, on the other hand, is not selfishness. It is a deliberate choice to prioritize your own well-being, values, and goals without disregarding the needs of others. It's about recognizing that you cannot pour from an empty cup, that your ability to show up for others is directly tied to how well you care for yourself. Self-focus is an act of self-respect, and it is essential for living an authentic, fulfilling life. When you shift from people-pleasing to self-focus, you begin to reclaim your agency. You start asking yourself questions like, what do I really want? What feels right for me? And does this align with my values? Instead of automatically saying yes to please others, you give yourself permission to pause and evaluate. You learn that saying no is not an act of rejection or cruelty, it's an act of honesty. Self-focus also involves setting and maintaining boundaries. Boundaries are not about pushing people away, they are about creating a framework for healthy, balanced relationships. When you set a boundary, you are saying, this is what I need to feel respected, valued, and safe. People pleasers often struggle with boundaries because they fear they will be perceived as rude or unkind. But the truth is, boundaries are an act of kindness both to yourself and to others. They provide clarity, reduce resentment, and foster mutual respect. One of the challenges of shifting from people-pleasing to self-focus is dealing with guilt. If you've spent years or even decades prioritizing others' needs over your own, putting yourself first can feel uncomfortable, even wrong. You might worry that people will think you've changed or that they'll accuse you of being selfish. But here's the thing, guilt is often a sign that you're breaking free from unhealthy patterns. It's a natural part of the process, and it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. Another challenge is dealing with pushback from others. When you stop people-pleasing, some people may not take it well. They may be used to you always saying yes, always accommodating, always putting their needs first. They might resist your boundaries, question your decisions, or try to guilt you into reverting to old patterns. This pushback can be difficult to navigate, but it's also a powerful reminder of why self-focus is so important. It shows you who truly respects and values you for who you are, not just for what you can do for them. Self-focus doesn't mean you stop caring about others. In fact, it often makes you better equipped to care. When you are grounded in your own sense of self, you can give from a place of abundance rather than obligation. Your kindness becomes genuine rather than performative, and your relationships become richer and more authentic. You stop seeking approval and start seeking connection. People-pleasing often comes from a place of scarcity, the belief that love, approval, or belonging must be earned. Self-focus, on the other hand, comes from a place of abundance. It says, I am already enough. I don't need to prove my worth to anyone. When you embrace this mindset, you stop chasing validation from others and start validating yourself. Self-focus also allows you to model healthy behavior for others. When you prioritize your own well-being, you show those around you that it's okay to do the same. You teach them that self-care is not selfish, that boundaries are not barriers, and that authenticity is more valuable than approval. Perhaps the greatest gift of self-focus is the freedom it brings. Freedom to live life on your own terms, to honor your own needs, and to pursue your own dreams. Freedom from the exhausting cycle of trying to be everything to everyone. Freedom to show up as your whole, imperfect, authentic self and to let go of the need to please everyone in the process. Let me know if you'd like further elaboration. Choosing courage over comfort is one of the most transformative decisions we can make in our lives. Comfort, while tempting and soothing, is often a space of stagnation. It is the place where we settle for what is familiar, predictable, and safe. Courage, on the other hand, is the willingness to step into the unknown, to face discomfort, and to risk failure or rejection in pursuit of growth, authenticity, and purpose. The tension between these two forces, comfort and courage, is a defining feature of the human experience. Comfort is seductive. It whispers to us that staying where we are is easier, safer, and more manageable. It encourages us to avoid taking risks, confronting hard truths, or venturing into the unknown. And while there is nothing inherently wrong with moments of comfort, after all, rest and security are essential parts of a balanced life. Problems arise when comfort becomes a trap. When we cling to comfort at the expense of growth, we begin to shrink ourselves, avoiding challenges that could lead to greater fulfillment, resilience, and wisdom. Courage, by contrast, requires us to confront our fears. It asks us to step into vulnerability, to embrace uncertainty, and to act in spite of discomfort. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to move forward despite it. It is the voice inside us that says, I am scared, but I will do it anyway. Courage demands that we push beyond our self-imposed limitations, question the stories we tell ourselves about what we are capable of, and take ownership of our lives. consider the many ways in which courage calls to us. It might be the courage to speak your truth, even when it's unpopular or uncomfortable. It might be the courage to set boundaries, to say no when you need to, or to walk away from relationships or situations that no longer serve you. It might be the courage to pursue a dream that others don't understand, to take a leap of faith in your career or personal life, or to confront a mistake and take responsibility for it. Each of these acts requires stepping outside the warm cocoon of comfort and into the uncertainty of growth. Choosing courage over comfort also means embracing failure as a part of the journey. When we avoid taking risks out of fear of failure, we rob ourselves of the opportunity to learn, adapt, and ultimately succeed. Failure is not a reflection of our worth, but a natural and necessary step on the path to growth. Every successful person has a story of failure moments when they stumbled, fell short, or faced rejection. What sets them apart is not that they avoided failure, but that they had the courage to keep going despite it. Courage over comfort often requires us to face difficult truths about ourselves and our lives. It's easier to ignore a nagging feeling that something isn't right, whether it's in a relationship, a career, or a personal habit. But courage asks us to pay attention, to listen to that inner voice, and to take action even when it's hard. It asks us to be honest with ourselves and others, to confront our fears, and to take steps toward change. One of the most powerful aspects of choosing courage is how it empowers others. When you choose courage over comfort, you inspire those around you to do the same. Your willingness to take risks, speak your truth, or step into vulnerability creates a ripple effect. It shows others that it's possible to face fear and come out stronger on the other side. In this way, courage is not just a personal act, it's a contribution to the collective strength of your community. Choosing courage also means letting go of perfectionism. So often we stay in our comfort zones because we are afraid of being seen as imperfect or not good enough. But courage requires us to show up as we are, flaws and all. It asks us to take action even when we don't feel fully ready, to start before we have all the answers, and to trust that we can learn and grow along the way. Courage over comfort is not a one-time decision, it's a practice. It's a choice we make every day in the small moments as well as the big ones. It's the decision to have that difficult conversation, to try something new, to stand up for what you believe in, or to take a step toward a goal that scares you. Each act of courage, no matter how small, strengthens your ability to face discomfort and builds your resilience for the challenges ahead. Importantly, choosing courage does not mean recklessness or ignoring the need for self-care. Courage involves discernment. It's about taking calculated risks, listening to your intuition, and knowing when to push forward and when to rest. It's not about jumping into discomfort for its own sake, but about recognizing when discomfort is a necessary part of growth. Choosing courage over comfort is also a deeply personal journey. What requires courage for one person might be easy for another. For some, it might be speaking up in a meeting. For others, it might be taking the first step toward healing from a past trauma. The key is to honor your own path and to recognize that courage is not about comparison, but about authenticity. In the end, courage over comfort is a mindset, a commitment to prioritize growth, authenticity, and purpose over the temporary ease of staying the same. It is a declaration that you are willing to face the discomfort of change, the uncertainty of the unknown, and the vulnerability of being fully seen in order to create a life that is true to who you are. Let me know if you'd like further elaboration. In conclusion, choosing courage over comfort, embracing vulnerability is strength. Setting boundaries with courage, prioritizing self-focus over people-pleasing, understanding the power of non-attachment. And recognizing your inherent worth are not isolated acts, they are interconnected practices that empower you to live authentically and wholeheartedly. Each of these principles invites you to step beyond the confines of fear, societal expectations, and self-doubt, guiding you toward a life rooted in purpose, resilience, and fulfillment. By leaning into discomfort, speaking your truth, and prioritizing your growth, you create space not only for your own transformation, but also for inspiring those around you. Life is not about seeking external validation or clinging to the illusion of control. It's about showing up as your true self, embracing imperfection, and finding the courage to take meaningful steps forward. The journey toward authenticity is not without challenges, but every act of courage, no matter how small, propels you closer to the life you are meant to live. It is in these moments of choosing growth over fear, truth over silence, and love over attachment that we discover the true essence of freedom, connection, and joy.